ask you this poll question just to get a sense check based on the last discussion. So if you've got your apps at the ready, it'd be interesting to hear your perspectives. If CyberSmart could help your customers meet certain regulations, which ones would you prioritize? If you could answer that poll, and then our panelists, can you see okay the screens, or there's one there? I'd love to see your perspectives, folks, and perhaps we can dig into it a little bit more as the day unfolds. Put a hand up if you need help from our team in getting onto the app, and Frankie can give you a hand. I'm dragooning you into things here. Really helpful, folks. Okay, ISO 27001, getting a big chunk of the votes. Actually, they're rolling in quite equally now. UK Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill, 25%. Cyber Assessment Framework, CAF, just under 30%. Nobody saying other, and nobody saying DORA, interestingly. NIS2, just under 12%. Really interesting. And like I say, folks, we will send these slides, including some of the results from the polls, onto you after the event. Any reactions to what you've seen there? Any surprises, or does that all kind of make sense to our panelists?
It was interesting in Manchester, wasn't it? There was, you asked a question with regards to which ones customers were most asking about, and it was almost unanimously ISO 27001. I don't know whether that's similar with you guys or not, but I thought that was quite interesting. Certainly for awareness that we've seen so far for CAF as an organisation has been pretty low, to be honest. I think there's a long way to go to build awareness, both from private, government, all the different angles that can do so if they really want it to take off. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I think we've mostly seen NIS2 only appear in companies that have got a European connection, and that's where it's coming from. If they've got, you know, German HQ or something like that, then they've heard about it. I think the other thing is that ISO has been around for so long that that's the sort of default. People see that as the pathway. We've seen it where it comes out of supply chain that people say, you've got to have Cyber Essentials Plus, and eventually we want you to get to ISO 27001. But I think that's because that's the only thing they to suggest. I suspect CAF and other things will come and replace it. In fact, I hope they do, because I think they're probably more appropriate.
Yeah.
I think CyberSmart have quite a difficult problem to get their hands on. You've got 3 different elements to cover. I thought there was going to be one that would stand out, but it seems like there's quite an even split. We've been involved in actually DORA from a financial services perspective, and that's been mainly because of a specific client that works across the world. Outside of that, actually, we've been seeing some customers asking us for Cyber Essentials and also taking them through ISO. And so therefore, obviously, from our perspective, is we can take them through one, but not the other. So we tend to either partner with someone that specializes in ISO, so it's making sure that you've got that blend. So there's some customers that are now asking for both, and I don't know if that's because maybe there's a bit of a push from their supply chain saying, oh, look, we need both of them. Yeah.
It's interesting about DORA, because, again, we were talking about that in Manchester on Thursday, and I know from a number of MSPs in the room, there's definitely been some focus on DORA, particularly in and around London and professional services. One thing that I can tell you from our side, pen testing heavily features in the DORA framework, and something that we traditionally hadn't done a huge amount of with our SMB MSPs. We've done more pen testing services, both one-off and recurring revenue, since the start of the year than I think in the whole company's history. So it does show that these things do start to have an effect, and there are opportunities out there, as the last panel suggested.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. So like I say, this panel is going to be diving into success stories from within the channel. What advice and best practices can be shared within that ecosystem is the word of the day, it seems. But quickly, can we get some introductions? Angus, I'll start with you.
Afternoon, everybody. Angus Shaw, Managing Director of Brigantia. We're based up in rural North Yorkshire, which is a strange place to have a cybersecurity business. But we're about 50 staff, 1,500 partners trading with us, largely in the SMB MSP space. Very focused approach to cybersecurity, working with about 20 vendors. We try to choose a vendor in every section of cybersecurity. Obviously, we're not quite there yet, but to try and avoid overlap and give clarity to our partners to be able to build recurring revenues for themselves whilst better protecting their customers.
Thank you. Paul?
Hi, everyone. Excuse me, Paul Wolferston, Managing Director of Regosis Limited. We're a small MSP based in the Midlands. We've been around for nearly 25 years. We've kind of more through happenstance than a plan, I guess, found ourselves with a lot more construction clients. So that's an area we focus on quite a bit now, and critical national infrastructure. So we're a small team, but with a focus.
Thank you. And last but not least.
Yeah, Sam Nunn, the CCO of Vicenza. We're a MSP based on the South Coast, about 19, 20 staff, supporting customers from 5 to 1,000 plus, ranging from things like IT support, cybersecurity, through to data center services. Yeah.
Thank you. And you can hear everybody okay, can you? No mic issues? Fab. Thank you so much for that. Can we start by digging into your various customer expectations? How have they shifted in the last, let's say, 12 months? And what could you offer? Perhaps there's a therapy session that could unfold in terms of how you have handled that and caught those expectations.
I think these two will be better from the therapy session standpoint, dealing on the front line. I think I have a bit of an easier job dealing with mainly you sorts of people as opposed to end clients themselves. I do not envy you for that one bit. From our perspective, I think end customers generally, and I'm going to stereotype massively, are in two camps. One is they're very apathetic and don't want to spend any money. They're being asked for money all of the time and are really fed up of being asked to spend this and add this layer of security when they think they've got a service that should do everything. I think that's a common theme that I hear a lot. Then I think the other camp, and there's not a lot in between, are the ones that have perhaps reached a point where they understand that cybersecurity is a significant risk to their business. And although they might not like it, they know that they need to invest in it. And largely, I think for those sorts of customers, things are a little bit easier to have more mature conversations, more of the conversations that the guys on the last panel were talking about. I think that middle ground between the two is really difficult. And I think that from your perspective, there's a long way to go to be able to get those customers up the curve to be more mature in their outlook over cybersecurity, and that cybersecurity, let alone compliance. So, as I say, I think these guys will have a bit of a better perspective on it, but from my perspective, that's what I hear and see day to day from you guys, which I hope resonates in some form.
Sam, what about your customers?
So I think there's three core things here that we really work on. So trust is a very finicky thing in our industry. You know, we can do 100 great things, but that one bad thing is what the customer really pins down to, right? And what we just need to reinforce is, you know, the good things that we do with them on a day-to-day basis, supporting their users, you know, managing their systems, keeping everything 24/7 operational all the time. And I think we just need to continue to reinforce that. But clients that come and approach us focus on three main things, really, which is, you know, being authentic, so buying into who you are as a business, buying into your kind of values, you know, who else do you support? It's being consistent, so making sure that you're doing the things consistently on a day-to-day basis, whether or not that's through the sales team checking in with them, whether or not that's marketing emails, whether or not that's the technical team. And then it's also about building value. So I know we're here about cybersecurity, but it's around things that, you know, what tools do we have available in our kit bag that may benefit the customer? So is it efficiency? Is it potentially some cost saving? Is it consolidating tools so it's easier for them to manage or even for us to manage? But yeah, so I think that's one of the main things is around trust. And that's one thing that we've seen recently, which I think, Paul, you'll talk about some of the breaches and things like that pick up on it. So yeah.
So I've got a slightly different perspective, I suppose. I don't think any of our clients fall into the camp that they would actively go out and do this stuff. No one's doing cybersecurity for fun, or even because they think it's the right thing to do. Maybe it's the sector that we work in predominantly.
Jamie loves it, Paul.
Yeah, sorry, Jamie. You know, this is something that pretty much, I'd say 80% of this comes to or 80% of our clients, this comes to them through their supply chain. Someone tells them they've got to do it. I think there's another 10% where it's been mandated because of some wider membership organization that they're in, something, you know, like St. James's Place, something like that. And I think 10%, and I think this is an important percentage that will grow, is coming through insurance and also finance. You know, we're seeing construction industry clients go out and sign a lease deal for, say, 2 million quid's worth of construction equipment, Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus is a condition on that, because the finance guys know what the chances are of them never getting repaid if that person, borrowing money doesn't survive a cyber attack. So those really, I think, are the drivers from our point of view, and we've been quietly drip feeding this stuff to a client base for some years, warning them that it's coming, but I don't think any of them really voluntarily have taken the leap much beyond, let's say, 6 months to a year before it became absolutely essential for them. They just won't. Everyone's got other things to do, other things they need to spend time and money on. So, it's understandable. If you run a small business, you've got priorities. You deal with things when they come up.
I think the only other thing I was going to add there is that some of the, Jamie, you had some slides up about some of the high-profile breaches that take place. That does tend to resonate with some of the kind of senior management team, and I think that's the thing where they start to buy into it. Even though they might be a very small business, is that they tend to take those things away and say, well, look, actually, M&S spend millions, tens of millions in cybersecurity, and we don't spend anything on cybersecurity. Yeah. And so therefore they start having that conversation and say, should we consider that? Should we speak to our MSP or IT company, which has been banging on our door for the last 12 months to say you should start investing in it? So that's things where we try and just continue that constant message to them. So eventually, hopefully, in these situations, it might just tick.
I think the insurance piece that Paul mentioned is interesting, because we've definitely seen an uptick on that being a driver. We try and monitor quite closely, certainly strategic deals, where they've come from. And there's been a massive uptick in those deals that are coming from mandated through cyber insurance, is the box on our Salesforce account. There was one only a few weeks ago where we received an order completely out of the blue from a partner in Ireland, significant order. Never seen the platform, never tried the platform, not buying cybersecurity for the right reasons, but had been told by their cyber insurance provider that they needed to have security awareness training. So they invested in that way. So we're definitely seeing that as a growth and certainly building awareness for sure.
I suppose that sort of instance that you're describing, kind of cyber impulse buying, is great for you as an organization, but it's not necessarily something that you can strategize around. So when it comes to your growth strategies that you're seeing success, what kind of advice can you share with the partners in the room as to how you're approaching that? Paul, perhaps I can come to you first on that.
So I think being persistent, you've got to keep reminding people that this is coming and that you do it. Until they're ready. As I said before, they'll just reach a point where suddenly they decide they need it, or it's pushed upon them. And I suppose the other thing, the thing I'd mention, because we've seen it happen, is that some in the construction industry, you tend to have a primary contractor or a couple of big contractors on a project. They'll turn around and push this stuff down their supply chain. But what they're also doing is they are going to people down their supply chain saying, you've got to have this. They're also saying, if you haven't got anyone, we've got an in-house team that will do it for you. And they're making it sound helpful, but actually behind the scenes they're admitting that what they're doing is recouping the cost of putting themselves through Cyber Essentials by essentially reselling all their services. So you risk being disintermediated, by other people getting in there first. So if your clients don't realize that you do this stuff, you might find it's too late and they've signed a deal with someone else, someone big, who they're already in business with and they may not want to say no to. So I think, be persistent and keep telling them you do this stuff. Because if they remember that you were the one that warned them this was coming and maybe dropped a few useful sort of hints in their ear, they'll come to you first. And I think that's important.
Sam?
I think, can I raise a question to the crowd? I mean, I'm going to see if I can get as many hands up as Mike did earlier. Who works in IT? Well, hey, you nearly got most of the people up. Okay. If you look at your website right now, do you have a list of industries where you work in? If you have, put your hands up. Quite a few, okay. And depending on your size, you've got a website, you've got an industry. Do you have content, collateral, brochures that are targeted to those industries? Put your hand up. Okay, so more or less most of you kept up to it. So I think one of the things that we've done is, from a marketing perspective, is we were originally going after every single market, as most MSPs do at first. And I think the thing is as we started to build our customer base, we really understood a bit more around, okay, who are our niche customers? Where do we understand the pain points? Where do we know what some of the tools that we provide, how do they click? And so what we did is made a bit of a conscious effort, there you go, to invest some time in building collateral, brochures, case studies, solutions, and really pinning down on the pain points that affect that industry. Because the thing is that you can go and create generalized content, but when you're speaking to a customer, they're trying to relate to it. And sometimes it's very difficult when you're trying to pitch cybersecurity. They're like, well, actually, how is that going to benefit me as a business? How is that impacting the industry right now? So that is one of the things that we've spent some time on. And I think also the other thing is, I think, Angus, you came up with a stat in Manchester, and we spoke about it before. There are so many tools out there from an IT perspective that when we're trying to sell it to customers, we as sales and marketing people, as well as technical people, need to understand what we're selling to the community. Angus,
it's a Canalys stat that I think I've probably used at our events previously if anyone's been at those, but Canalys came out with a report in 2024 that said that you guys as a managed service provider have a choice of 80,000 vendors that you could work with across all the different areas that you work in, whether that's network security, hardware, whatever it may be, cybersecurity, 80,000 vendors. So I was going to say something about education, but and these two have covered it much more succinctly than that. But we did a survey back end of 2024 on our partner base, just over 100, and out of just over 100 responses, 77% said that the issue and the biggest barrier for selling cybersecurity as an MSP was that of knowledge and awareness. So it's the same theme from all three of us, a little more precise from these two.
Yeah. And I think that was the main thing I was saying about complexity, is sometimes being able to look at your tool set and the vendors that you work with and really trying to hunker down and say, actually, you know what, do I need 6 different vendors that are doing the same different tool? From a sales and marketing perspective, it made it very difficult for us to create all that content. Don't get me wrong, CyberSmart and all the other vendors do a great job around creating all that co-branded content. But then you've got to train the sales team up on, how is it different? How are the different price points? How does it fix that problem? And then also actually going through, I think Mike, who's here, is one of our technical guys. It's like, well, Mike has to go through 6 different lots of training around the different tools that we're selling to customers. So I think that's where it's looking at the complexity of what you've got and really trying to say, well, actually, can this fit maybe 80-90% of my client base? And you know what, the 10% of extra services, we may then go out to market and look for something that might fit and do on a case-by-case basis.
I've had a question come through on the app that kind of links into this, so I'd love to get your perspective on it. Someone anonymous has asked, you don't have to put your name, folks, that's absolutely fine. They've said, we see CyberSmart as a springboard for other cybersecurity products and services which enable us to become true MSSPs. Does the panel see CyberSmart as something to upsell or an upselling platform? What kind of opportunities are you using to harness it in that respect?
So I think we might go on to another topic around this, but one of the things that we do with some of our customers is a cybersecurity posture review, and that's actually built from the sales team, not the technical team. So the sales team will have a list of accounts that they'll work with, and what they'll do on a monthly basis is run through where there are gaps maybe in their security posture. And from that point, we can obviously then leverage some of the questions, the answers, the CyberSmart platform to really help them kind of take that next step up. Because some customers do want to go on that journey to get in Cyber Essentials. But the thing is it's a bit like, how far along am I? I've been asked by my insurance company or I've been asked by my supplier to go and get it, but I don't know if I'm 60% of the way there or 20% of the way there. Hopefully, more often than not, they're more further along than 20%. But what you can do then is we will then look with our customers to see where do they need to invest, where do they need to spend some money, do they need to go and get some policies or processes in place, and then from that point is then they can invest or have create a bit of a roadmap 12, 18 months before they can achieve that certification. But yeah, that's pretty much where you can then upsell that CyberSmart platform to take them on that journey and then continue to fill the form out as they go and invest as well. So, yeah.
That's helpful.
I think for a lot of our partners that have come onto the CyberSmart platform over the last couple of years, it's certainly the ones that have been doing a good job, which the vast majority of partners are doing their absolute best in difficult circumstances. So it's been quite good affirmation for them to see that their customers largely are not a million miles away. I think where the real challenge comes is when MSPs are taking on a client for the first time, and the reason they're bringing them on is Cyber Essentials. I think that's a really difficult conversation because you're immediately having to sell them stuff, and generally, building trust first is a lot easier than having to sell them stuff first off. Does Cyber Essentials, and therefore, in this conversation context, do CyberSmart partners have a good opportunity to sell other services and build recurring revenue streams? 100%, whether that's other CyberSmart services or whether it's a password manager, whether it's a patching solution, whatever it may be. Clearly, to be Cyber Essentials compliant and do it properly, you've got to have certain levels of tooling and documentation and behaviors in place. And so, absolutely, it's a great door opener on one hand, but I think more on easy pickings from a existing customer standpoint to actually reaffirm everything you're trying to do for them at the moment and are largely doing.
Thank you for that question. And I'll just ask maybe one more, and then I'd love to open up the floor and create a little bit more direct discourse. But Sam, you kind of brought up this word trust, and I'd love to unpack from each of you kind of in this, very crowded market, as you put it, with all these different choices of MSPs and vendors. How do you differentiate yourself, your offering, your communication style to build that trust with your customers and drive those long-term relationships so you don't just feel like you're upselling at the next opportunity? Sam, I'd love to come to you first, actually.
Of course. I think one of the things I did mention before is around that cybersecurity posture review. So one things that we'll do is it doesn't necessarily all go into cybersecurity. It also goes down into things like modern work. Are they using AI? Are they using some of the other tools around infrastructure? So things like management, monitoring, patching. Are they doing all of that stuff? But it's all around, are they using Copilot? Are they using ChatGPT? What other tools are they using? Because then what you're doing is you're building your trust outside of just cybersecurity. Because I suppose it's got that that element to it. When someone's talking about cybersecurity, it's like, oh, this is going to be expensive. How much is this going to cost me? Or oh, great, I'm going to speak to the technical people about cybersecurity. But when you start talking about outcomes, and we said about relief-based selling, is what will happen if they don't invest in it? Rather than talking about the outcomes that it's going to say, well, you're going to get a certificate and you're going to achieve it, is actually talk more on the darker side of it. So if you don't spend the money on cybersecurity or on that issue, what is going to happen to their business? I think I spoke to Mike earlier. I just said, I tend to sit down in boards and some of the directors, and I say, look, if you don't invest in this, what's going to happen? Actually, from your perspective is speaking to them about a business and what they're trying to achieve, and then say, okay, well, look, if you don't spend that money or if you don't invest in the tooling, is be aware that there may be implications that come down the pike. So it's really trying to just talk about that, an element of relief-based selling there.
We see a lot of, particularly in this sort of space, around organizational risk is a much easier conversation to have with a owner of a business that's got 30 staff than talking to them about cybersecurity. So it's about horses for courses and making the conversation relatable to what they understand. And if you've owned a business for a while or you've been part of a board for a while, whether it's a 30-person business or a 300-person business, you have to consider risks. And this is a risk that all need to consider. It doesn't necessarily have to be about cybersecurity or compliance.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. However, most of the clients we're talking to, cybersecurity is something that's initially happening to them. It's a thing they've been asked about. They don't understand it. They've been told they've got to have it. So the first thing to do is train people that, in the nicest possible way, to just trust you enough to always come to you with the question before they make a decision. We want a new phone system. We need a new internet connection. Anything you're going to connect to your network, just please talk to us first, rather than land it on us after you've made a decision. So it's about teaching them to trust you as a point of contact and trying not to sell to them at every opportunity. I think once they trust you enough for that, then when they come to you having been told that they've got to have something, they look to you for guidance, in the sense that the analogy I used last week was I walk into some boardrooms, it's like going into the waiting room at the vets. There's just a lot of scared-looking animals. They don't know why they're there. They know they're not going to enjoy it, but they know it's going to happen anyhow. So you're trying to make them feel okay about this in the sense that they don't want to understand. They just want to know that someone else is going to make it okay. And they've got too much else to think about. So I think expecting, in the nicest possible way, expecting them to get into the detail of a lot of this is probably not useful. I think all they need to know is that you're competent to do it and that you can get them to where they need and that you can be clear with them in the communication and the process. And especially what we try to do for people is we say, well, look, we will be the ones to nag your staff in the nicest possible way into doing this. You don't have to find someone to do it. Just make it very clear to everyone that they need to work with us and that it's not optional. But beyond that, we'll take this burden off you. And a lot of people respond well to that. I think taking the pain out of the process actually helps quite a bit and is probably an underrated approach because a lot of small businesses just don't have enough time to think straight about this stuff.
I would just add one thing there, and Paul's mentioned it there about how you can't really expect them to engage in it. I think, without being too kind to Jamie sat just there, the simplification of the CyberSmart message and being very clear on what their proposition is over the last 12 months has made a massive difference. Both from our perspective as a distribution partner to CyberSmart and for you guys, being crystal clear with what the outcome is from partnering with CyberSmart, and that just feeds down nicely into end clients. So, yeah, that was hard, but...
Just don't look him in the eye. I'd love to open the floor, folks, and I do thank you, those of you who've been popping some questions in the app, so I'll come to those as well. Vicky's going to be our roaming mic at the back, as always, and I'll float around the front. Does anyone want to jump in, share anything that resonates, share a comment, or ask a question?
Everyone wants lunch.
Don't mention that yet. It's not time. It's not ready. I do have a question from the app then that I'd love to ask. Let me just get it up so I can ask it rightly. Again, I think this is from someone anonymous, which is absolutely fine. If you'd like to ask a question and not leave your name, you can do. Somebody in the room has written, what do you see as the turning point or the light bulb moment for customers, and it's back, to wake up and realize that they need to engage with cybersecurity? How do we ensure that they don't engage too late? What was your perspective on that? I'll open the floor.
When it happens. That tends to be sometimes the case, and it is a bit late in the day. There is I think the chap at the front, I don't know if he's still here, was talking about obviously when you started your role for a first week or two. Yeah, I thought it might have been you. Sometimes in those situations, and again, I was going to turn around and I suppose finish up with this, is that we had a very junior guy in marketing start with us many years ago. First week in a job, he got an email from the CEO, wasn't the CEO at the time, asking for him to go out and buy a £20 gift voucher, and send it across to an email address. At the time, he'd literally just come out of college, obviously was completely oblivious to the fact of what's out there, so he went off and did it. Our CEO actually turned around and said, look, if that ever happens again, I'm not going to ask you for a £20 gift voucher, I'll ask you for an Aston Martin, right? And just a bit of a comical thing, because we were just saying, look, and as we said earlier, is in some of these situations is providing, don't scare people to put their hand up and say, I might have clicked something or I might have done something wrong, In that situation is that, and applicable to that question as well, is that might just start to encourage management to say, you know what, we're seeing it happen, we've got off the hook this time, but maybe we need to consider investing in more tools or capabilities, or actually just going out and understanding what's out there. The funny thing is, the other story about that is he came into the office the next day with a little small Aston Martin car and gave it to our CEO and said, there you go, there's the Aston Martin, I don't need to buy you next time. So, but that's maybe where the buy-in starts to happen. I think that's the piece that you just need to understand. So,
yeah, I'd second that. The point where the CEO stands up at the front of an all hands meeting and says, yeah, that was me that clicked on that link that brought the servers down. We had one actually where it was in the hospitality industry. Someone junior on the front desk had decided to check their Hotmail and brought the company down. and literally had a strip torn off them in front of the company virtually. 2 weeks later, the MD did the exact same thing, and that was the light bulb moment for him when he realized it can happen to anyone. But I think the MD, it's been made very clear that management has bought in and is now making this a priority, because if staff don't see senior managers take this stuff seriously, don't see it turn up in agendas, don't see anything change in behaviors of their managers, they won't do it. And certainly our clients that have been most successful in driving this culturally are prepared to put carrot and stick behind it. So for example, we've got clients that make the ongoing completion of your cybersecurity training, just these online, 5-minute videos, part of your 360 review. And if you haven't hit a minimum percentage of doing those, it doesn't matter what your score is, as long as you're doing them, then you cannot get all of your annual bonus. Simple as that. And that's the point at which that company gets cyber.
I think the other bit you mentioned about, obviously, the CEOs buy-in. I spoke to a non-profit organisation about a couple of months ago, actually. Complete prospecting call. The COO at the time said, you need to speak to my IT manager, and I was on the call with him. I ran through every different tool and capability and saying, look, this is what we're speaking to other non-profits about. And they said, actually, management team have bought into IT and cybersecurity, and they have put that as the critical element before anything else. Yeah. Which was actually, from a non-profit, is quite a, you don't really see that. So I was actually trying to say, look, actually, your house is in order. And they said, why are they doing that? I said, well, actually, the management team have bought into it, and actually some of them have experienced issues in the past. And so because of that, what they're doing is that they're bringing it into that new organization, saying cybersecurity needs to be top of the agenda from the same. But that is why, unfortunately, it is the case of, until someone experiences firsthand, that might be the only time where it starts to really kind of hunker down into people's minds, unfortunately.
Yeah. One of the realisms of the industry. Thank you very much for your question, though. Any other questions, either live or in the app, before we wrap up? Fair enough. I just want to quickly then whip round each of you, if you don't mind. What would be your one thing, in a snappy way, that you would want to leave our friends and partners with to reflect on as they go to lunch very shortly? Angus, can I come to you first?
Well, we've talked a lot about education, so I'll leave that one. But I think being relatable and personable is massive. So things like case studies, success stories that have been done well. Traditionally, it's something that certainly SMB, MSPs have found difficult, finding the time to do marketing and the sales effort needed to grow a business. But yeah, being more personable, sharing success stories, and building that into how you're trying to build new customers is definitely worth the effort. Definitely worth the effort.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think mine would be know your industry and be realistic with them about what they can do and what pressures they're under, but then just take the pain out of it for them any way you can. Just make it as frictionless as you can for them. Don't use acronyms if you don't need to. Speak plain English. Don't give them lists of tools. Just make it easy and painless.
Yeah, I think the only other thing is that I spent a bit of time, from my perspective, looking at conversions, leads being generated and stuff like that, is look about the customers or the prospects that you're getting at the moment and trying to understand the industries they're coming in, and spending a bit of time creating content that's applicable to them, understanding that industry and their pain points. And what you may start to see is actually your win rates start increasing. But also not just that, it just means that you can go to market into that particular industry and be stronger with case studies and actually, reference cases from other people that have said, look, they've done a really good job because they understand what we're going through as a business. So.
Yeah, everyone loves a bespoke experience, but particularly in a space that feels stressful or confusing. So I totally understand that. Thank you so much, panelists, and thank you for your digital questions. Please do give them a round of applause. Thank you, thank you.